Hi everyone, and welcome to Lesson 5 of the Beginner's Game Dev course. In Lesson 5 we're going to be covering feedback and the user interface. So why don't I just show you what we're going to be doing. So we're heading for something like this. You see there's a user interface element here now. And so that sort of style of user interface we usually call a HUD, or heads-up display. So it's showing the number of missiles and engine parts that I've collected, and I've added a little bit of code that makes those enemies now drop those parts. So those are all engine parts. I hope they drop some missiles. There we go. So and I can pick up a missile now, and then if I shoot a missile with the right mouse button, it's a more powerful weapon as well. Okay. So yeah, we're mainly focusing on this user interface and how to design that and how to program it. Yeah, so a little bit of concept before we begin. So feedback and the user interface. So in games, of course, we all have access to these sort of user interface elements, and of course buttons and menus and all sorts of things that can give the player feedback about the equipment and other useful things that they've got in the game. So I really like Metroid games by Nintendo. This is Metroid Dread, and I've taken inspiration from their user interface. So in here they've got the missiles collected, some energy, and I don't even know what that is. But you can there's these heads-up display type user interfaces are usually for first-person shooter games. So you can kind of imagine, like in Mandalorian, like either with Bo-Katan's kind of visor drop down, or maybe even on the inside of Mandalorian's visor, you might have these kind of like semi-transparent images that show them like their vital statistics or something. So those are usually for first-person shooters, but they also work for space-themed games in general. So that's what I'm going for. And yeah, so I'm gonna show you how to build something like that in Gimp. Nothing too fancy, but just enough so you can build your own user interface elements to start with, okay? Yeah, so right, here we go. So in Gimp, we're gonna create a new project, and we're gonna use those default image size parameters, because if we quickly check out our game's viewport and look at the mouse coordinates down here, it just happens that the viewport is 1920 by 1080, so it's the same size. So before we get into it, I just want to do a couple more configuration things. I'm going to go image configure grid. I'm going to set this to 8 by 8, and I might just change the color because I know my background is going to be black in a moment. So I'll set the I'll just kind of make this like this gray color and say okay. I am going to also make sure that under view I've got snap to grid selected. That's going to be really helpful. And also show grid. So now I can see the grid that I've just configured. I'm just going to save this as well. So save this project, and I'll put mine into a folder here called HUD, and I'll call it HUD as well. Cool. Yeah, so the background. So the reason I made this as big as I did is because I want to kind of I want to pretend that like the background is the game that we're playing in, and so I can see what the HUD looks like on a nice big black background, kind of like the space background. So first thing I'll do is I'll fill this background with black. So I click on the fill tool here. I'm going to make sure I've got black selected. Okay, you can also select it from here. And this opacity thing, I've been messing with it, so make sure your opacity is set to 100 to start with, and then that this is on foreground fill. Okay, so now if I click left mouse button, control scroll the mouse wheel to scroll in, then you see the grid is over the black background now. All right, time to start building this HUD, right? So what I need to do first is to add a new layer. And I'm going to call the layer border because it's going to be the border for our HUD. Now the order of layers here is important because basically if border is on top of background, it will show if it's behind the background, it won't show. So just make sure things are in the right order, okay? Now I can start drawing. So I'm going to use the pencil tool to start with. I'm going to set the opacity to 100. And size 4 looks good to me. Yeah, size 4 looks okay to me. And then I will select, make sure I've got the circular brush selected. Okay, and then the only other thing I want to do is to select the color white. So I go like this. Okay. All right, now the size has gone up again, so I'll set that back to 8. Okay, so I can start drawing this HUD now. I'm just going to zoom out. Yeah, so I kind of want it to be nearish the top left-hand corner. And yeah, I can actually use guides to kind of help me with this. So I might do this now. I'll click and drag from the top and like say that I want my HUD to finish about there. And I'll click and drag from the left. And I want the kind of length, the width of my HUD to finish around there. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, cool. So now I can start drawing. So I'll just zoom in a little bit more and I will place the first dot right there. So actually I'll start there. So I click the first one. I'm clicking and holding the mouse wheel to move around. And then I can hold the shift on the keyboard to draw a line, but it's not drawn until I click the left mouse button. And so there we go. And I will now, I want this to be like a 45-degree line, so I'm just trying to make those line up with, wait, what? Yeah, that's about right anyway. So I'm still holding shift, and then I can draw my last one here, and that'll do me. Yeah, looks good. Probably a little bit thicker than I'd like, but that's okay. I can change that in a moment. In fact, I'll change that right now. So to make this thinner, I'm going to use the fuzzy select tool, this wand, select this, and then I'm going to say select, and then I'm going to say shrink, and I want to shrink this selection, yeah, by 2, let's see. Yeah, so I'm just doing this because mine's a bit thick. You don't have to do this if you've started out maybe thinner. And then I'm going to invert the selection, so get used to doing this. So this is now selected everything except the part in the middle, and I can press delete. Okay, so that makes it a bit thinner. Yeah, I'm happy with that. All right, now I'd like to kind of make that sort of chunky part of the HUD, which is here. So that kind of chunky extra bit there. Oops. All right, so I'll come back to doing that. So to do that, I'll use a different tool this time. So again, the pencil tool, different brush. I'll use the pixel brush, and I'll use a size of, what do we say? Let's say 12. Like I want this to be thicker. Make sure the opacity is up. Okay, and then I can draw this on. So let's see how the block is a bit bigger than the other bit now. So yeah, I'll start, yeah, looks good to me. Holding shift again, I'll draw that up to like there, and then it's hard to get the lines in the right position. Oh, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, and then finish it off. I don't want to finish it at the end. I want to finish it like somewhere in the middle-ish. So like that. Okay. And yeah, that's looking okay. So I want to kind of shave off some of these rough corners and there. So I'm going to use the free select tool to do that. And what I'll do now is I'll just zoom in on this and I'll just chop these off. So I can just click that corner and then yeah, maybe like there. And I'm not holding shift here, I'm just left clicking. When the yellow dot appears, it means it's going to join up. And now I can press delete to delete that piece. And if I press, I'll show you the menu actually. If I go select none, then come on, select. Why has that not worked? Yeah, it has. It just didn't update. So when I go to select none, it unselects everything. You can also do Control Shift A, which I'll do in a moment. So I'll do this here as well. I'll zoom in there. Yep, looks good. And finish that off. Delete. Control Shift A to deselect everything. Great. And then I'll just do this tidy up these ends here. So I can use the, actually down here, why don't I just use the rectangle tool? So I'll just select like this, delete, Control Shift A, okay, to deselect. And then on the end, I will use the free select tool again. So I'll come zoom in, I'll do it from about there, and I'll cut like, yeah, like that. Close it, delete, Control Shift A. Okay, so how's that looking? Yeah, looks pretty good. Good enough, anyway. All right, so we've got the border on. That's the first step. Now we just need to add that kind of transparent, glassy bezel thing in the background. So we can do that by adding another layer. So this one I'll call the bezel. Okay. And this one should be behind the border, not in front of. So I'm going to move that one down. Let me just show you, actually. If I move the border one below the background, see it disappears because it's actually behind it now. So if I put that back above it on the layers hierarchy, then you can see it because it's above it. Okay, so the bezel, right? So this needs to be this nice sort of half see-through background. To do that, I'm going to draw again with a pencil. I'll use pixels. I'll set the size to 4, quite small, because I want it to be a sharp line. And the opacity, I'm going to turn this opacity down to like 21. That looks fine to me. And I'm going to set the color kind of in theme with my game. So yeah, if I my player has kind of an orange ship, so I'm going to use the orange kind of hue here, and I'm going to go to the dark side of that, which is turning red. Yeah, maybe about there. I don't want it too red. Something like that, okay. Now that's the color, but it's going to have some transparency as well, so we'll get to that in a moment. But for now, we'll just draw it. So it's the same thing as before. I'm going to just draw with a pencil, and where should I start from? Oh, actually, first, these guides, I want to adjust these guides to help me. So I'm going to go Image, Guides, and Remove. And it is helpful to have this guide, this one that shows you where the bottom is. So I'm going to leave that there, and I'll start my bezel from here. Okay, so if I start from there, if I click once there, like that, and then I hold the Shift key again, I'll zoom out, and then I can kind of finish it before the guideline. So like, where is it? There, somewhere. Okay, and then I can hold Shift again, and I can carry on and make sure it's a straight line. Yeah, that was good. Okay, so I'll do this all the way around, somewhere up here, and like this. Yeah, and then finish off over there. Okay, so I've drawn the outline of my bezel, and I'll obviously I want to fill the middle of it. So what I'll do is I will use the fuzzy select tool, make sure I've still got this bezel layer selected. I'll select the bezel, and then I'll do select, invert. So this is now selecting everything but the bezel, which means that I can fill in its center with the same color, but I need to set the opacity here to the same number I had before. So I will I'll fill that, and it should be the same as the border that I just drew for it. Okay, so how does that look? We can zoom out. If we turn off the grid for a moment, that might help us see a bit better. I'll turn off those grid lines, the guideline as well. Okay, and Control Shift A to select nothing. Yeah, so it might need a, I'm not sure if it's transparent enough at the moment, but we'll find out. But yeah, that's roughly it. So if we want to now just check what it looks like with the, those kind of missile and the engine parts on, we can do that quite quickly just by checking on the parts that I've already found. So if I go into my HUD folder, parts, no, if I look in my sprites folder, here we go. So I've got the missile, I'll chuck that on, and I can use the move tool to move that. So I'll put that up over here somewhere. I can also use the scale tool, which is on here. If I right click and go scale, or just press Shift S, then I can make that a bit bigger. Yeah, and then I have to click this button here to complete that. So shortcuts, M is for move, so I'm just doing that now. Yeah, something like that. All right, cool. And the other piece I wanted to put in there just to see how it looks is the engine part. So yeah, M to move. Probably I'll scale that a little bit as well. Shift S to scale. Yeah, and click that. M to move again. Yeah. Okay, so we zoom out. It's not looking too bad. I think I might have made this bezel a bit long on the screen, but I'm going to go with it for now just to get on with the lesson. And you can obviously tweak yours by selecting and chopping bits off, etc. Okay. Yeah, so I'm done with the design of it. If I want to export it, I only actually want the bezel part. So I don't need the missiles, I don't need the engine parts, I don't need the background, I just want to export that. And so if I now go File, Export, and then, yeah, I'll put it in the same folder as my project, export as a PNG, and export this, then I can go and have a look. Oh. I can have a look at my HUD, which is here, open it up, and yeah, I think that'll do. All right, so we can go ahead and drop that in the game now. So coming back to Construct 3. So let's try this then. Let's just chuck this in as a new sprite. Okay, where did it go? There it is. You can see the viewport, its size matches the viewport, which is how we intended. Yeah, and actually the transparency of it is quite good because we can still see stuff behind it. So I think that's worked out pretty well actually. Yeah, so that's on there. Why don't we rename it? So it's calling itself HUD, but I'll capitalize it. And in fact, what I'll do is I'll put UI underneath in front of it, underscore HUD, because there'll be some other parts for the UI that we kind of want to group together there. So yeah, I'm happy with that, and I'm going to right click on it and lock it in place. Great. Okay, so if we take a step back for a moment, just remember where we're going with this. So we were kind of wanting to do something like this. I want to do missiles up here. I can show you on Gimp, can I? I want to do missiles and engine parts like that. So, you know, I want you to go away and find your own parts. I've found a couple already, but just as a refresh, itch.io is always a good place to look. So if we go to the main page, game assets, and then we can click on free. That's a magic number. And then we can search for things like space. Yeah, press enter. So that's searching for things tagged with space. And yeah, that's usually enough to get you started. And there's plenty to look at here. I found this one earlier, which wasn't bad. Just remember when you get to someone's a content creator's itch.io page and you click download, remember most of them, well, the free ones are free, right? So you don't have to pay. Of course you can. If you like their stuff, you probably should, but you can also just say, no thanks, just take me to the downloads. And of course there's Open Game Art as well, which I don't need to remind you about Open Game Art. We've looked at that a lot. For sound effects, so when you're working on the new, missile sound or whatever, free sound effects is a good place as well. So yeah, go and find some, for a start, just go and find your placeholder, for a start, just go and find an asset for an engine part, and the missile we can do later, okay? All right, so engine parts. So let's throw this together. So I want an engine part counter on my HUD, so that when I pick up an engine part dropped by an enemy ship, it the count goes up. So so I can go to this, I can just go and find the sprite that I wanted, this one here. I just drop that in, and yeah, I'm going to change the name of it in a moment, but for now I'm going to turn it over, and I think I'm going to resize it. Yeah, it's slightly larger than I like, so I'm going to say this one maybe drop 10 off of this, so I'll say it's like 33, and go to stretch and then say done, and that just shrank that a little bit. So yeah, that looks a bit more like it fits in the game now. So what I'll do is I'll drag that up here as a reference. I'm going to change the name of it to, I'm going to call this one pickup, right? It's really important, pickup. Remember this, pickup engine, or just engine is fine. So it's really important that I name this thing pickup engine, because that's the part that I want the player to pick up in the game. But there's another copy of it that I'm about to create that I want to be on the user interface. And actually, when you get to create the missiles or the secondary ammo that you do at the end of this lesson, you're going to have the same thing. Actually, you're going to need one for the pickup, one for the UI, and lastly one to actually shoot from the player. And this is really important, because if you try and use the same object for all three of those things, then the collisions won't work properly. Okay, so I'm going to create now I'm going to clone this, and I'm going to call this second one the UI. Okay, UI engine. Okay, so yeah, it's right next to the HUD now, and I'm going to drag this onto the HUD. There we go. Cool, sweet. So, right. So the first thing we need to do is to get the enemy to drop one of those engine parts when it's destroyed. So we get into the code now. Yeah, so we've got some player input code up here. I don't need to look at that at the moment. We've got a bunch of enemy code here, and then a bunch of player code. So where do you think we'll be looking to start with? In the enemy code, right? So this is the part that decides what to do when an enemy loses all its health. Now remember, there's an explosion, and the enemy is destroyed. But for now, we also want to spawn one of those engine parts, okay? So we could do this quite simply by saying, yeah, enemy red, spawn an object. Which one? Not the UI engine, the pickup engine, okay? And then say okay, and we could play test that, and that would work pretty well to start with. Okay, so this one's been dropped, okay? I can't pick it up yet. But what about, one thing that's quite common in games is have a bit of randomness, so that you never know what part might be dropped, for example, or maybe whether a part will be dropped at all. It adds a bit of mystery to the game, I think. So what about if we made that so it wasn't always dropped by an enemy, but just sometimes? So the way we'd do that is to add a bit of randomness by saying add a sub event, and this is going to be, so this will be a system event. We're going to compare two values, okay? And what this means, compare two values, what this means is we can check whether, basically we want to decide whether we drop an engine part or not. And how we do that is we get construct to create a random number between 1 and 0. So it could be like 0.1 or 1 or 0.5. And basically we say it's like flipping a coin. We say if the number that's been created is less than 0.5, then we will drop an engine part. But if it's greater than 0.5, then we won't, okay? So this compare two values thing is where we create the random number, okay? So we say random and bracket, and we're creating a number between 0 and 1, like I said, and we want to say if it's less than or equal to, actually we'll just go less than. If it's less than what? 0.5, like I said, so it's like flipping a coin, heads or tails. Yes, it happens about 50% of the time heads and 50% of the time tails over a large number of flips. So we say that's done. So that becomes a kind of sub condition here. And this is where we decide whether the engine part should be spawned or not. Okay, so let's try that again. And if we destroy one, then there's no engine part, okay? So the coin landed tails that time, so I guess. But this time it landed heads. What about this time? Okay, there we go. So you can see that by using this random number generation, every time that enemy is destroyed, we kind of flipping a coin to say, yep, do we create do we drop an engine part or not? Okay, so that's that. Right, so that was how we spawn the the engine parts, but what about actually showing them on the HUD, the count of them? Yeah, so we need to record or kind of store the number of engine parts picked up somewhere, and we can do that by creating another instance variable on the player. So I'll go to add new instance variable. I'll call this one engine parts. It's a number, it should be 0 to start with, and we click OK. And so we can add to that number every time we pick one up, and then we also want to be able to show that number on the HUD, so we should add some text for that as well. So what I'll do is I'll right click, insert new object, text, and I'll put that over here, double click on it, and I'll change this to 0 to start with, and I want to change the color of it to white, like this. I'll bold it, I'll change the font to something a bit more interesting than Arial, because it's not an email, is it? So for fonts that, yeah, okay, so maybe I'll go with one of these and click OK to that. This is too small as well, so I'm going to change that to maybe 25. Make this a bit bigger. 25 is not big enough. Let's try that 30. Maybe 40 even. Okay, yeah, that looks better. So that's the counter for our engine parts. Let's go over here to the text that I just created. Rename this. I'll call this UI engine text. Okay, cool. All right, sweet. So yeah, now we can use that players engine parts count to update that engine part number. So where were we? So okay, so the enemy drops an engine part. Great. The player will need to pick it up. So we'll add a new section for that. So we'll say when the player collides with the engine, pickup engine, then we need to increase that count. So var for variable. So we need to add to the engine parts number. So this is the engine parts number on the player. So add 1 to it. Say done. Okay, so that's that. And then we also need to add a new section where we update that user, that HUD. We can add a new system tick condition. So remember, this just happens over and over as quickly as it can, where the UI engine text, so we type set text, so set text, we'll set the text to be equal to what? It's the player's engine parts count. Okay, so done. So when we play this and we pick up an engine part, we should see that number increase. But I forgot to add that number to it. Okay, so it did increase, but I forgot that the user interface is going off the screen at the moment, so let's fix that first. Yeah, so all of the user interface parts need to be on their own separate layer. So in order to do that, I need to say add layer at top, and I'll just call this UI. Okay, now this user interface, all this stuff needs to be on that layer. So I can shift select and I can go layer UI. Okay, and then I do need to also set the properties of this layer so that it doesn't move. So if I go to, the scroll rate should be 0 and this parallax should also be 0 for X and Y, and that will stop it moving. Let's have a look. No, it does not. So what's happening here? I think right, so I need to unlock this. I unlock all, click the user interface HUD, and which layer is this on? It's on the wrong layer, so that should be your UI as well. I'm just going to check all the others now. So UI engine, that's on the UI. What about the text, which I can't select? The UI text is on the wrong layer, so that should be on the UI as well. All right, so yeah, they should all be on the right layer now. I'll just lock this HUD sprite again in place. So lock selection and play. Let's see if it moves now. Okay, that's better. So it's staying where it should be. And now let's see if we can pick up one of those parts. Yeah. So it's not being destroyed yet, but yeah, whenever I move over one, it's increasing that count, which is exactly what we wanted. Cool. We need to do a bit of tidy up now for that engine part. So two things. First, it doesn't disappear when I pick it up, and also there's no sound effect. So I'll add those two things. The first thing is to make it disappear. So when the player collides with an engine part, then I also want to make that engine part disappear. So pick up engine, and I want to destroy that one. Okay, so that's done. But I want a sound effect as well. Yep, so I'll add a new sound effect, which I downloaded earlier. So sound, I downloaded, where is it? Pick up engine part. Yeah, that's the one I'm using. You can, of course, find your own. So right click, import sounds, go find this. Yeah, and then import. Import, and I can double check preview it here. Yeah, that looks good. All right, cool. So yeah, I want to play that sound as well. So audio, play, which one? The pickup engine part. I should tag it as well, so we'll just call it pickup engine, press enter. Yeah, cool. Let's just try that again. So that part should disappear and make a sound. As soon as I can get one of them, yeah, here we go. There we go. All right, so your challenge here is to do a similar thing as to what I've just shown you, but now to add ammo to your HUD, okay? So add a secondary consumable ammo, like missiles, to the HUD of your game. I know some of you already added a secondary weapon to your game when you right-click the mouse button. If you've done that, that's great. If not, then you're going to add that as well. Okay, so I'll go through the steps. So step 1 is find a sprite for your secondary ammo online. Step 2, add the ammo to your game 3 times. Why 3 times? So once you're going to add it as the missile, the thing that actually is fired by the player. Once as a pickup, so the thing that's dropped by the enemy for the player to pick up. And then lastly, once as a UI element, so the one that goes in your HUD. Okay. Step 3 is when the projectile hits an enemy, give the enemy more damage than the laser would. Step 4 is to spawn a pickup ammo randomly when an enemy is destroyed. So there's a hint there. You could just add an else statement to the random spawning code you've already written for the engine part. Number 5, so similar to the engine part pickup, create an instance variable on the player to count the picked up ammo. And lastly, add an ammo counter to your HUD and update it every tick like you did with the engine counter. Okay. All right, so I hope you've had a bit of challenge and a bit of fun with your game development today. I'll see you all next time.